What up, folks? Once again, it's your boy Tim with another ride sharing video. What is it about Uber and Lyft, their passengers, that lead them to rarely tip drivers? How many of you out there have went above and beyond for a passenger? Maybe carried a bunch of grocery bags up the steps, waited for somebody while they ran into the gas station or into a store for 10 or 15 minutes, helped someone carry a bunch of laundry bags into the laundromat, and they did not tip you shit, not a damn dime. Have you ever wondered what would make a full-grown adult not realize all the shit you just did and get out of your vehicle and not pay you any damn thing? That's what we're going to talk about today, because I'm often asked that question. I used to be a taxi driver, and I've been off and on in ride sharing since 2014. So I'm a veteran at this game, and I've been often asked, what the hell makes these folks not tip? Because in the taxi business, if you drove a cab, tipping was incredibly common. Very similar to a bartender or working in a restaurant. It's a service industry position, and most of the passengers that rode in cabs throughout the 80s and 90s that I can remember tipped. We always did. So what changed in this business? Now, my veteran drivers out there, you'll probably recognize some of this because you lived through it as well. So feel free to back your boy up in the comments. And those watching, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell so you get these videos. This is generally what we talk about. So what changed in ride sharing, whether it's Uber or Lyft compared to the taxi business? The answer is Uber. Now, for the remainder of this video, I'm going to be using the Uber statement, but it also applies to Lyft. The difference is that Uber is the granddaddy of ride sharing, and for the most part, Lyft just has followed in their footsteps. So any changes to the industry you see coming from Lyft, generally it's not very long before Uber, or before any changes coming from Uber, it's generally not very long before Lyft does the same damn thing. Most of those changes, if you're a driver, are not in your best interest. But what changed in regards to the tipping from taxis to ride sharing? Well, here's the numbers on ride sharing. Studies show that only 1% of Uber passengers always tip. 60% stated that they never tip at all. So 60% of folks that are out here taking rides in Uber and Lyft, 60% of those folks never tip. Only 1% always tip. So that's a lot of folks that are not tipping. I think most drivers get a tip about 70% of the time. Actually do not get a tip about 70% of the time. 70 to 80% of your passengers in your vehicle, you're probably not going to get a tip from. So if you drive 10 people from point A to point B, you'll probably get a tip from 2 to 3 of them. Now, let me know in your market, what is your percentage? Have you seen a bigger percentage of passengers tipping? Or is it even less than damn 20%? Shit. But what caused this to happen? Well, here goes. When Uber came into the business to defeat the taxi business, one of the benefits of this game compared to taxis was that they promoted it as a cashless transaction. Whereas if you rode in a taxi cab, folks generally paid in cash. There are taxis that could take a credit card at the time, but a lot of people paid in cash, and a lot of folks do not like dealing in cash. So with an Uber, you could easily put your credit card, your debit card in the system and never have to worry about that. So not only were they promoting it was cashless, but here's some shit they were telling the passengers. You do not have to tip, and the driver is not expecting the tip. That was on their website for the first few years. Tipping is not required nor expected by the drivers. Like I said, you veteran drivers in the comments, back your boy up if you remember this. When I first started driving for Uber in 2014, I would have passengers actually ask, do you mind if I give you a few dollars? This is a nice car. I know you guys are not supposed to take money. And I'm looking like, what the hell? They were actually telling the passengers, or better yet, literally disincentivizing them from tipping by telling them, you don't have to tip. and the driver's not expecting it. But I did have a few passengers started pleading with me like, you let us control the radio, you got a nice car, you've been very friendly, you've been very talkative. Do you mind if we give you a few bucks? We won't tell and things like that. And I'm like, what the hell? Hell yeah. In fact, I'll give you another example. I had 3 women in the car one time, and one woman wanted to give me a tip, and the other girl was like, well, they really can't take it. I'm like, I really turned around and I almost went up like, what the hell you mean we can't take money? That's the only fucking reason we out here. So I got the tip, but that just shows you how strong the anti-tipping culture is that Uber was instilling in the passengers. So why the hell would they do that? Well, think about it. According to Uber, when they were questioned on this, when they were interviewed, they stated that they believed that if you allow tipping, it would cause drivers to be discriminatory, meaning that they would go to wealthier neighborhoods where they were more likely to get tips and avoid neighborhoods where people were unlikely to tip them. No shit. Of course, we're going to go to passengers that show us love. There's nothing stopping folks that are in lower income areas to tip a driver another $1 or $2. They did it in the taxi business. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I didn't have a lot of money. And when we caught a cab, we tipped the guy $1 or $2. So that excuse is bullshit. You know what the reality of it is that Uber and Lyft have no stake in tipping because the tips are supposed to go 100% to the driver. It does not benefit them at all if a passenger tips or not. So even if a passenger becomes known as a zero tipper, they still want that passenger service just as much as a big tipper because it means nothing to them. They get the same cut out of the guy who doesn't tip as they do out of the one that does. So they do not want you avoiding people who do not tip because they mean just as much to them as the person that does. They have no cut. And as you all know, Uber does what's best for Uber. They don't give a damn about us, damn about you, et cetera, et cetera. And like I stated, Lyft has followed a lot of these tactics. Now, the difference is Uber took 2 or 3 years before they even allowed tipping through the app. Both the passengers and drivers were begging Uber to allow tipping. Why the hell can't we tip these people? They were literally begging to do that. I mean, I've had passengers where I've taken them to ATMs and things like that because they wanted to tip me and they didn't have any money or any cash on them. So drop me off at the ATM. I'll, take some money. I can give you $2 or $3. The shit should have been in the app since day one. Now for Lyft, they did start out pretty early on with tipping already in the app, which also led Uber to expedite their change and put tipping in the app. But Uber was fighting tooth and nail not to put tipping in the app, not to allow drivers to be tipped. Like I stated before, it took about 3 or 4 years before Uber started allowing you to tip the drivers. Now, clearly, there's not one damn thing in the best interest of the driver in preventing passengers from tipping or interfering with it in any way at all. Why the hell would they do that? Well, I just told you, because it doesn't benefit them. 3 or 4 years. For you veteran drivers, you'll remember. And even in 2016, when Uber lost a lawsuit that was based on the fact that they were treating drivers like employees but calling them independent contractors, something that continues to this day, that was when they decided or agreed to put tipping in the app. And even when they put tipping in the app, they actually emailed the customers, particularly in New York City, and told them at this time tipping is still not required nor expected by the driver. So they gave the customers the ability to tip, but then emailed and told them they don't have to. And that is why, to this day, the tipping culture in ride sharing is still pathetic. Is that Uber spent years telling passengers you don't have to do it, and the drivers are not expecting it. It would be no different than if you opened up a restaurant chain and you put a sign on the front door that said the waitresses do not need to be tipped and they're not expecting tips. You do that for 2 or 3 years, you can remove the sign all you want. The waitresses are going to notice people are not tipping anymore. You've changed the fucking culture. That's what Uber did. And that is what has happened in ride sharing, is that the tipping culture has been wiped out through the infancy practices of Uber. And like I stated before, ride sharing is ride sharing. Whether you're riding in a Lyft car, riding in an Uber car, it doesn't matter. It very much follows the same pattern for a passenger. And as a result, that method of operation where you do not tip the driver is the mindset of most passengers. Only 1% of passengers state that they tip every ride. 60% state that they never tip at all. Those are horrendous numbers. And even to this day, Uber doesn't promote tipping. You could easily put a big tip your driver type, banner or something like that on the app to remind the passengers to tip us. They don't do any of that. Not only do they not tip us, but like I state all the time, when I started driving, the fares in my market were $2.20 to the driver, and now they're 72 cents. So they not only told the passengers you don't have to tip the person, they've steadily kept reducing how much you earn. None of this is in the driver's best interest. So I don't think you need any more proof than that to know that this shit was never meant to be good for you as a driver. But before I wrap it up, I wanted you guys you veteran drivers, when did tipping come in your market? If you've been driving long enough, have you been driving long enough that you remember a time when tipping did not exist? Because it slowly started expanding from market to market. But in the beginning, like I said, no passenger could tip the drivers. I think around 2016, 2017. What percentage of your passengers tip? If you take 10 passengers from point A to point B on any given day, what percentage of them are likely to tip you? How often do you see tips in your market? Anyhow, folks, as I say in every broadcast, follow the damn channel. I appreciate the participation in the comment section. I respond to any and all comments. You guys have been spot on with that. Thank you. And I'll see you in the next video.